In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the MyArcade pole position racing player, and can this budget $50 US home arcade product scratch the itch for those of you who want to play the arcade classic pole position and pole position 2 at home? Welcome back to the channel. It's me, Michael B, and today I'm taking a look at the MyArcade pole position racing player. Now, for those of you who have been following me for a while, you may be surprised to see me doing a MyArcade review. I've always been the kind of person that these products didn't interest me. One, they weren't real arcade recreations, so they didn't exactly scratch my nostalgia bone, whereas they were just making smaller, aka desk shit, ways to play these products. The other thing is, let's be honest, they always came off as kind of cheap. That is, until they did the MyArcade pole position racing player. That's a product I was interested in, and I heard so many good things about it, even from friends in the community. I wanted to check it out for myself. So today, we're going to be taking a look at the MyArcade pole position racing player. Is it as good as people say, and should you consider picking it up and adding it to your collection? So guys, here is the MyArcade pole position racing player. I gotta say the packaging is relatively nice. Here on this side, we have a cutout of the side art from the pole position cabinet. On the back, we get some product images, some screenshots from pole position 1 and 2. On the inside, more product images and the features you can expect to get from this arcade. So let's take a look at what's included with the package. So you open up the very sharp plastic top, mind you. There's a little bit more plastic, and then we get the MyArcade racing player out. It's a little bit complicated to get the rest, but you get a certificate of authenticity for the MyArcade racing player. You're going to also get an instruction manual. It'll tell you everything you need to know about the racing player. And here's something that isn't included enough with video games anymore. You get a poster showcasing all the different games that you can get from MyArcade. This takes me back to the NES days. Very cool inclusion. So usually where I start these reviews is I take a look at the arcade form factor, but it's not fair to really judge MyArcade in that capacity because they're not trying to be an arcade recreation in any capacity. You will notice the cabinet itself is made of plastic. As my buddy Glenn Planamento, or Glenn's Retro Show, says, it's good sturdy plastic. Now, they went with plastic instead of wood here, obviously as a cost-cutting measure that allows them to offer these mini arcades racing players at the budget prices we have come to know from MyArcade. One thing you will also notice, because it's made of plastic, this machine feels super light in your hand, easy to carry around, but one trade-off of that is when you're playing it on a desk, it is going to move around a little bit if you're not holding on to it. Now, one area where I will give them credit, they did try to recreate the arcade nostalgia a little bit here, is with the artwork on the sides of the cabinet. It does recreate the artwork on the classic pole position cabinet. However, it is missing some very specific Atari branding. Now, another negative, in my opinion, is the marquee doesn't light up. It seems like it's such a small feature, easy to do, and adds so much nostalgia, but what we have here is just a sticker going across. You'll also notice with the marquee, it's super long and super thin, and because of that, the actual classic arcade marquee doesn't really fit in this section. Now, probably the ugliest looking thing on this whole arcade are the little plastic wings on the sides of each marquee. Obviously, this was done because they didn't want to recreate the actual shape, but they still wanted the same side image. So what they did was they pushed the marquee all the way back level with the bezel and just left this space open, so there were no viewing angle problems. Me personally, I think this looks terrible, and I wish MyArcade would figure out some way to change it so it is a little bit more arcade accurate and less ugly. Now, I've got to say the bezel around the screen looks really good. They recreate the classic checkered flag off the original arcade, but they did leave off some very specific Atari branding as well as the player card that goes up at top of the screen. However, it still looks pretty good for what it is. One area where I absolutely have to give them credit is making sure we had the screen at the right aspect ratio. Here you have a 4x3 monitor, about 2.75 inches. I actually measured it at 3, but maybe I'm bad at measuring. So we get a 2.75 inch screen, and on top of that, the screen is really good. The pictures look crisp on the screen, and the colors are bright and vibrant. Now, one area where they absolutely took liberties with the cabinet is with the controls, because here they put the steering wheel as well as your shifter and gas and brake right there on the control panel, where in the normal racer would have these kind of all over the place with the steering wheel and shifter on the control panel and the gas and brake down on the bottom of the cab. So, of course, the innovation that has got everybody excited about this product from MyArcade is this is the first time we've seen a steering wheel on a miniature arcade racing player, one that's licensed anyways, and this racing wheel or steering wheel is actually really good. It looks like it's using some kind of spinner technology in order to work, but the racing wheel is actually really good. It's got a nice resistance to it and feels really good to use. The stick shift right to the side of that actually works surprisingly well, no issues there. Then the buttons for the gas and the brake, well, let's be honest, they're nothing to write home about. They're cheaper buttons, but they still get the job done. Underneath the control panel, there's 3 separate buttons. The first button is a menu button, which you'll hold down in-game to opt out to the opening menu, where you can choose between the 2 games on the cabinet, Pole Position 1 and Pole Position 2. On the other side, you're going to find a credit and a start button. The credit works like you think it would. It basically adds coins to the games, allows you to credit in. The start button on the other end doesn't seem to really have any function at all, because once you put a credit into the game pretty much automatically starts. Now, on the back of the cab up top, you're going to find your on-off slider switch, and then on each side, you're going to find your volume up and volume down buttons. Now, there's no way you could possibly miss what these buttons do, as one is a plus side and one is a minus sign. The sound on the cabinet comes from a stereo speaker and is surprisingly good. You get good, clean sound that's actually pretty loud from this cabinet. Now, on the bottom, we do have a headphone jack in case you're playing this unit around your family and you don't want to disturb them. You can plug in headphones, but let's be realistic here. You're plugging in the headphones because you got this thing at work and you don't want to get caught. Right beside that, you have a USB-C port that you can use a USB-C cable and charge the unit. And then right next to that, we actually have a screen dimming button that allows you to control the brightness of the screen. Now, while you can power the cabinet using a USB-C cable, it's actually a whole lot easier to unscrew the back, and you can put in 4 AA batteries, which will allow you to power the unit and make this thing a lot more portable. I know my buddy Detroit loves a cabinet with a battery. This arcade comes with 2 games, Pole Position and Pole Position 2, and both of these are in fact the arcade ROMs. I know MyArcade has a history of doing some confusing things, where sometimes they include the arcade ROM, other times they include console ROMs. I'm happy to tell you here, both of these are the arcade ROMs, and they work just like you expect them to. Now, what most of you have been waiting to hear from me, how do the games play on the arcade? Because that's the most important thing, and I've got to tell you, I am surprised by how much fun I'm actually having with this racing player. The controls work excellently and interact with the game exactly how you would expect. I talked about the steering wheel earlier, and I can't tell you how much of a joy it is to use, surprisingly. Like I said earlier, it's got a nice resistance to it, and it allows precise movements that are necessary in order to master these tracks in each game. Now, even though I'm having fun with it, obviously this is a game I'm not that familiar with, so I'm not exactly excellent, but I've still been able to put up some high scores on the cabinet. Now, for those of you out there that are familiar with Pole Position, I think you're going to be able to put up some pretty great scores, and if you want to hold on to them, luckily the cabinet does offer high score saves on this unit. I will say though, if you leave the unit off for about a week or so, the battery backup kind of fails and my high scores disappeared, but if you're playing it pretty regularly, I don't think you'll have any issue. Now, the coolest thing about all this is both of these games are arcade classic games that we have been waiting to come to the home arcade section in one form factor or another. These are games that classic arcade collectors die for, are going out looking to collect. It's a prized possession in their home, and it's long overdue that somebody brought them to the home arcade section, albeit not in the form factor I'm sure most of us were hoping for, but at least we can finally play them and play them well. So guys, that's my look at the MyArcade pole position racing player, and for $50 US, I think you're getting what you paid for here. It's actually a very good experience playing pole position and playing pole position 2, albeit in a death shit sized arcade player. Am I a big MyArcade fan now? I don't know about that. Am I going to race out and get all their units? I don't think so. I still don't think the product is for me. But this product, specifically the racing player, seems like you are getting a good experience and a bang for your buck. And one thing I am excited for is to see what they do with Sega Outrun. Anyways, guys, let me know in the comments down below, what do you think of the MyArcade pole position racing player? Is this something you're interested in? Have you picked one up? And what do you think about it? Once again, thank you so very much for watching. This is Michael B. the Game Genie. I'll talk to you next time.